The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. Before we start, I would like to ask the prosecution and the civil party lawyer, have you consulted with one another concerning the use of the remaining time allocated to you?
Yes, Mr. President, we have been consulting throughout the day, and the position at the moment is as follows. My colleagues have shortened their examination just as I have. They require approximately 1 hour. I would ideally require another half an hour to 1 hour. I do recognize that would take us beyond today. We're in your hands. If you're able to grant us some additional time, we will continue for another half an hour to an hour, in which case the civil parties could continue on Monday, subject to your instructions, of course. We're in your hands.
The President, the national lead co-lawyer for the civil party, you may proceed. Counsel Pech Ong. Good afternoon, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Your Honors. We have consulted with the prosecution. The civil party may take up to around 1 hour or 1 hour and 15 minutes. We have reviewed the questions posed by the prosecution, and the time the prosecution started to put question to the witness was at around 2 or 2:30 yesterday. So it has we actually have agreed with each other in terms of time allocation among the two teams. Thank you. The President, considering the request by the prosecution and taking into consideration the relevance of the question with the witness in question now, we grant the request for the prosecution. But we, however, remind the prosecution to be mindful of the times and try to frame the question so as to ascertain the truth.
We're very grateful, Mr. President. We will be as efficient as we possibly can and as brief.
Excuse me, if I could just make one quick comment, Mr. President. I hope that thunder didn't have anything to do with you not consulting the defense, but we have absolutely no objection to the extra time given to the prosecutors and the civil parties. Thank you.
The President, Mr. Prosecutor, you may now resume your line of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Vaughan, as you've heard from Mr. President, we will try and complete our questions shortly, and I'm very grateful to you for your patience and for your answers. Just before we broke, we were discussing two individuals, two relatives of Mr. Khieu Sampan's, who were identified by another witness, and of course one of them you have already described. Let me ask you first, in relation to Bang Yet, the sister-in-law. She is described by this witness as the head of women in the sector. This is the same section A4 that we were looking at before. Is that your understanding of the position that Bang Yet held? Was she the head of the women in the sector?
Response. That I did not know. Actually, I did not know what specific position she held. I actually wanted to secure her release at the times. I did not bother to ask what position she had held before that.
And in relation to the other individual, Bang Chon, he is described as having worked in the Sector 103 Commerce. Do you recall whether that is the position held by Bang Chon, Khieu Sampan's brother-in-law?
That I did not know either.
And just one more question on these individuals. I'm not sure if you answered my question earlier. Do you know whether Bang Chon was also arrested and detained in Siem Reap?
Response. I did not know. I only knew that Miet Jiet were detained there.
Thank you. Now, returning to your first statement, E3/424, at question and answer number 10, you were describing the Preah Vihear region, and you said the following. I'll read the question and answer for context. Why were you transferred by upper echelon to Preah Vihear province? Answer. Because Preah Vihear was the autonomous area directly controlled by the Central Committee. Ta Nuon Chea and Ta Khieu Sampan used to visit there. How did you know that Nuon Chea used to visit the Preah Vihear region?
I knew it from the people. There was one representative of the people who was actually detained in Preah Vihear as well, and he told me. And over there, I also saw the photos of Mr. Khieu Sampan and Mr. Nuon Chea. did not know whether or not they had visited over there, but I saw the photos that they were dragged out in that photo.
Could you describe where you saw these photographs?
Bad.
I saw those photographs in the office known as the Law Office.
What was the purpose of that office?
Bad.
That office was meant for the telegram office, and it was a place where they store statistics and figures and information as well. And when I went there, I saw two personnel by the name of Ơi, and the other one I do not recall the name, but there were two personnel at that office.
Were these the people that you described in your statement who would type and send your telegrams to Mr. Khieu Samphan?
Bad.
Oh, I recall them now. The two people were Ơi and Ol, but Ơi had already left Cambodia and he is residing in overseas. I don't know whether or not he is deceased or alive, but as for Ol, he is still alive and is residing in Cambodia.
Did those two people tell you about Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan's visits to Preavi here?
Bad.
Response: no, they did not tell me directly, but they simply told me that this office were under the supervision of Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan, but they did not tell me that Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan came to this office.
Thank you. And if I can just explore that a little bit further. When you say this office, is that an office of Sector 103?
Bad.
Response: to my understanding, that was the office attached to Sector 103. No, actually it's Office 103, not Sector 103.
Thank you. These two individuals, according to your statement, they would type and send your telegrams to Mr. Khieu Samphan. Do you recall what their positions or responsibilities were in Office 103?
Bad.
Response: when I got there, they had already transferred or removed Secretary of Sector 1 because the former Secretary of the sector were assassinated, and then that office were located in Le Vuong. And then later on, I knew another man by the name of Stav Vuong, who had his office in the former high school of Luvieng district.
In your first statement, that this is a document we'll be looking at, E3/424, in question and answer number 12, you said that the following: when I was observing the situation in Preah Vihear province for about 2 months, Tamok ordered to remove Ta Kim from the Sector 103 by using his forces to transport Ta Kim from Preah Vihear province. And in that same question, you identify Ta Kim as the Sector 103 committee. So is it correct that Ta Kim was your predecessor as the person in charge of Preah Vihear?
Yes, that is correct.
The office where Oi and Ol were working, Office 103, was that Ta Kim's office?
Bad.
To my knowledge, it was not. It was not the office of Ta Kim. Ta Kim office were located in the former high school compound, and Rovieng district office was far away from that former high school.
Do you know what happened to Ta Kim when he was removed by Tamok's forces?
Bad.
Response. When I went there, I met Ta Kim in Rovieng district office, and then people told me that actually there were many people in Chai, in Chomksan and Thala Borivat districts, all told me about the arrest of Ta Kim, but I did not know how they went about arresting him and what they did to him.
Now, if I can recap for a moment what you told us earlier about your meeting with Pol Pot, and please correct me if I'm incorrect here. Pol Pot had said to you that there were many arrests, that there had been many arrests in the region. Is that a correct summary of what you were telling us?
Bad.
Response. That is correct.
And also, I just want to make sure I recall your answers correctly. Did he ask you or direct you to investigate the situation in the region and to investigate the arrests?
បាទ
Yes, he instructed me before he left. He told me that, comrade, you had to go and inspect that place, because that location was the autonomous sector under the direct supervision of the center. So he instructed me to conduct investigation in relation to the arrest of his mother-in-law and relatives in order to find out the truth.
I think we might have just slight confusion. My question was whether Pol Pot had instructed you to investigate arrests in the Preah-Vihear region.
ប្រាប់
Yes, he did.
Did he say to you anything about who was arresting people in the region and who you are supposed to investigate?
បាទគាត់អត់
He did not tell me the names of those who conducted the arrest.
Now, I just want to show you a document that discusses arrests taking place in that region. Your Honours, this is document E3/1077. It's a telegram which we have discussed previously in court. It's addressed to the beloved Committee 870 and dated the 10th of April 1978. With your leave, I will give the witness a hard copy and ask him a couple of short questions about these events in the north.
The President, you may proceed.
Mr. Vaughan, and it's a slightly long document, and we're going to look at only a brief portion of it. The second paragraph, and I should say before I start, this document is signed by Say, and you've mentioned earlier someone called Say who was attending meetings in the north, Pol Pot and Tamok. The third paragraph says the following: the base of these traitors is on Dungrek Mountain. We have a plan to search and destroy it. Our Intam's group previously used the traitors in Sector 103, whose leader was Ah Hong. He was their supporter. But after we arrested Hong and all of his henchmen in Chamksam district and in Sector 103 military unit, Intam group has no more support. And just one more brief reference at paragraph further down. This starts with number 3, point number 3. It says the following: the internal situation. there is no important change. The situation is normal. We are continuing to purge the remaining group continuously, including those who oppose our revolution openly and secretly. In your discussions with Pol Pot, did he mention to you receiving reports from the north about arrests that were being carried out on a continuous basis in that region?
I did not receive that information. It could have happened before my arrival.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to a slightly different topic. One point that we covered earlier, we discussed an individual called Chu Chet, who was the Secretary of Division, Secretary of the West Zone. Could you tell the court what happened to Chu Chet? Did he continue to be the Secretary in the West until the end of the Democratic Kampuchea period?
In his capacity as Secretary of the West Zone, as far as I knew, he did not stay in that position until the end.
What happened to him?
I did not know what happened to him because it was the affair between himself and the center.
When you say it was an affair between him and the center, who do you mean? Which individuals were the center?
I meant Pol Pot
Tamok.
and Tamok.
Mindful of instructions by the Chamber, I'm going to finish briefly. I just want to ask you a few more very brief questions. When we were discussing a meeting to plan the attack on Phnom Penh, we were looking at your statement E3/424, and this was question and answer number 3. We've already looked at this. And this is the passage where you said that the military commanders from the zones attended a meeting with the general staff, such as Ta Son Sen and Ta Nun Chia. You also told us that you didn't attend that meeting yourself. How did you learn that Nun Chia and Son Sen took part in that meeting of the general staff with the military commanders?
As I said earlier, I only learned of this information through my division commander, as I personally did not attend that meeting.
So it was your divisional commander, Song, that told you that the general staff people such as Ta Son Sen and Ta Nun Chia had met with him and other commanders. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. And just a couple very brief questions. During the time, during the Democratic Kampuchea period, so the entire time from 1975 to 1979, did you ever attend meetings or study sessions with Nunchia?
From 1970 to 1979, I did not attend any meeting with Nunchia.
And perhaps my last question. What position, or I'll rephrase that, as far as you know, did he hold any position that related to the military after the fall of Phnom Penh?
I did not know which position he held or for which section he was in charge of. It was the affairs of the center.
Thank you very much. That was my final question. Mr. Mayor Swan, on behalf of myself and the prosecution team, I want to thank you for coming and answering our questions and being patient with us. Your Honours, we're grateful for the time allotted to us, and we have no further questions.
President, the floor is now given to the lead co-lawyers for civil parties to put questions to this witness. You may proceed. Lawyer for civil parties. Good afternoon, Mr. President, Your Honours, parties and civil parties and everyone in and around the courtroom. Good afternoon, Mr. Mihwoon. My name is Pech Ong. I'm the national lead co-lawyer for civil parties. I and my colleague, Elizabeth Simonofo, will have some questions for you. So far, you have responded to several questions, and we hopeful that you would respond to our questions so that the court and the public will have more knowledge of what happened during the past. My first few questions will be related to the death of the establishment of the Revolutionary Army. You were in that army of the Khmer Rouge for so long, so my question is, when was that army established? Response. Regarding the establishment of the Democratic Kampuchea Army, it was started on 17 April 1975 with all the three main forces, the Air Force, the Naval Force, and the infantry. Question. Can you tell the Chamber prior to 17 April 1975 did the Democratic Cambodia Revolutionary Army exist? Response. Prior to 1975, and actually commencing from 1968 or 69, there were about 100 soldiers only in the southwest, but I cannot recall the date. Question. Did you hear about any event that could have taken place at Bai Dam Ram? Response. Yes, I heard about that. That is the establishment of the resistance force in that area in Viljab in 1967. Or it could be in 1969, I am unclear. Question. Can you tell us why you said there was an establishment of the resistance force from that area? What led to the creation of that resistant force or movement? Response. I learned about that as the leadership or the cadres instructed us on that issue. It could be Tamok who told us about the resistance back then. And he said after the conclusion of the war of Isara, the Cambodian people didn't have independence, and for that reason there was this inception of the resistance movement. Until when the French already left, the movement still existed in the rural areas. Question. This is my last question regarding that point. Who actually formed the resistance movement in Bai Dam Ram, as you just stated? Response. I cannot recall the name, but I was told by Tamok. Bai Dam Ram village was the source of the inception of the resistance movement since the Isara era. My next question is the following. Can you recall clearly the date of the establishment of that resistance movement, which later on to bring about the birth of the armed forces? Response. I learned of the inception year, that was the 1968, but I did not, I cannot recall the date prior to that. I can only recall the year. It started from 1968. Question. From that date onward, can you recall whether you received any information regarding the name of that resistance movement, or whether it was known as a particular unit? So what was the actual name of that resistance movement? Response. I cannot recall that, or maybe I was not told of the actual name of that movement. Question. Did you hear the words that it was called the Secret Protective Force? Response. The name Secret Protective Force was the force for the protection of the cadres, but there was nothing else. Question. Can you tell us what was the duty of that Secret Protective Force in the 1960s? Response. The Secret Protective Force would be based at the countryside, and they would conceal themselves and concealed their identity in their resistance to gain independence, to overthrow the capitalists. Question. In relation to the effort to overthrow the capitalists, what did they actually do? Response. I did not know the details of that, but at the countryside, they would engage in the propaganda secretly with the people, telling them about the oppression, about the economic situation, and about other situations inside the country. They would engage in the relay of that information to the people secretly without having it known to the authority. Question. In the 1960s, did any group have any special role to carry out an ambush against the Lunol's force? Response. There was no such force back then because there was no weaponry. Question. Did you hear the phrase that the armed forces were the force of the dictatorship? Response. This phrase was not used back then. It only existed in the 1960, 61 or 62, 71 or 72 rather. Question. Can you explain to us the actual meaning of this phrase that the armed force was the sole equipment or tool of the dictatorship? Response. It means that we strived our best without thinking of the benefit. We sacrifice ourselves for the nation. Question. Could it also mean that once you receive an order that armed forces had to carry out that order? Response. At that time, it need not have that kind of connotation because the forces were minimal. Question. What about at a later stage when the forces were rather large? For example, in the 1970 or 1971 up to 1979, let's say. Did that connotation that the armed force was the absolute truth of the dictatorship, what kinds of tasks did they engage in? Response. In 1970, during the coup d'etat, the people and the armed forces mainly backed Samdach, and that was the time we mobilized the armed forces and that we could actually work as a proper armed forces. Let me go back a little bit in this next question. Did you ever hear about the attack on the barrack by Dam Ram by the secret force? Response. At that time, I did not know whether there was a barrack in the Bai Dam Ram village, whether there was a base of the Khmer Republic armed forces. At that time, there was no way of communicating from one to another. It took months for us to contact one another. And that was difficult. And sometimes we had to walk in the forest for months, from Badambong to Kampong Chnang or to Kampong Spư. So there was actually a disconnection of the communication between these small forces for months. Thank you. Question. Can you tell us that after 17 April 1975 and until the 6th of January 1979, did the armed forces or the military have any specific roles inside the country? Response. The roles and responsibilities of the military from 1975 were based on the line that on one hand we attacked the enemy and on the other hand we engage in production. Questioned. In the role of attacking the enemy, did it also, or was it also involved in the security matters? Response. The military had their duties at the borders, at all sides of the borders, to the east as well as to the west. Only one special zone forces remained inside the zone. Question. Can you tell us about the various security centers? Were they under the supervision of any specific ministry under that 3-year and 8-month period of the regime? Response. As far as I know, if the security center belongs to the zone, it will be under the zone's supervision. If it was within the supervision of the division, then the division would take charge. So most of the security centers will be under the supervision and the coordination between the zones and the divisions. Question. You said the military had one hand with the weapon and another hand to engage in the production. Did you hear the phrase that to produce a 3 tons of rice production per hectare? Response. I heard about that because while I was in Koh Kong, I was protecting the coastal areas, but at the same time we engage in the production as well. So of course I heard that phrase. Question. Can you tell us from where that phrase was originated? Was it compulsory to produce 3 tons per hectare of rice production? Response. It originated from the leadership level, from the zone secretary or from the division commanders, that we had to produce 3 tons per hectare of rice production in order to sustain ourselves and to support the state. Question. The zone secretaries and the division commanders, did they initially make that decision, or whether there was somebody else who made that decision of producing 3 tons per hectare of rice production? Response. The decision was made by the sector and the zone secretaries, that is in regards to the decision for the production of 3 tons per hectare. Question. I cannot really quite get what you just stated. So it means that the decision was made at the zone level, or was it made at the level higher than the zone level? Response. As far as I knew quite clearly, the secretaries of the sectors and the zones made that decision, but I am not sure as to whether the zone or the sector secretaries received further instructions from the center. And if that was the case, then it would be the decision from Pol Pot. Question. You said the decision could have come from the center. Did you know who were at the center level? Response. At the center level, there were Pol Pot, Nuon Chea, Ta Mok. They were the main characters. Questions. Were there other people at the center? As you said, these were the main people. Can you try to recall, besides these people that you mentioned, were there other people at the center level? Response. That's all I knew. Thank you. Now I'd like to touch upon the structure, the military structure. As you were a soldier and involved in the military, you have that knowledge. So you knew that there were three main armed forces. Can you tell us the military structure from the sector level downward to your level at the area where you were based? How the structure was like militarily like from the sector downward? Response. In the zone there would be the zone military, and then the sector military, the district military, and that was all. Question. As for the zone secretary, were they divided into various, or were they given responsibility into various sectors? Or were their structure divided into the military style, like, for instance, division, regiment, and battalions? Response. Allow me to make it clear when it comes to the military structure. For the zone military, it started from a group, and it went up to battalion, to regiment, and up to division. As for the sector military, I have no knowledge about that. But I believe the military structure would be similar to that of the zone military structure. Question. Do you talk about regiment and various other structures? What was the level above the regiment? Response. Within one regiment, there would be 3 battalions, and the system of the structure goes like that. It's times 3. So 3 regiments would assemble one brigade. Thank you. Question. You said about the 3-time multiplication of the structure. Can you now tell us about the specific tasks assigned to these kinds of structure? The zone military has the responsibility of protecting the outer border. As for the sector military, they would provide the protection within the sector, and likewise the district military would provide the protection for its respective military district. President, Thank you, witness. The time is now appropriate for today's adjournment, and the chamber will adjourn it now and will resume on Monday, the 8th October 2012, starting from 9 a.m. And on that day, the chamber will continue to hear the testimony of this witness, Ms. Woon, who will be questioned again by the lead co-lawyers for civil parties and then by the defense teams. Mr. Mevian, the hearing of your testimony has not yet concluded, and you are required to return to next Monday, starting from 9 a.m. Likewise, the Duty Council, you are also invited to return next Monday. Court officer, in coordination with the visual section, please assist the witness for the transportation for his return to his residence and have him returned next Monday. Security guards, you are instructed to take the two accused Noon Chi and Kit Sampon to the detention facility and have them return next Monday before 9 a.m. The court is now adjourned.